Good morning, good morning, good morning, or whatever damn time of day it is you're watching this. This is Chad Everett Brochures, the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, and also the author of the Human Manual. And today's episode is on arguing with your partner, how to develop yourself or mature yourself in the disagreements. So it's for your future. All right. Now, as all of my videos, if you find value in them, by all means, please share them. Share them as often and as much as you like. You have my permission to do so. If you have any comments or feedback or any kind of suggestions, please leave them in the comment section. And also, or you can email me at chadbrochures@gmail.com. Same spelling as the channel name. So with that, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, anyone in the relationship, for the most part, has experienced the relationship arguments or disagreements. Conclude them as being fights, which actually create an encode or an engram of making them more definite and who's right, who's wrong, and almost as if they're like little battles trying to win some war we call the relationship. And even for myself, and I'm a development junkie, knowledgeophile, really, I absolutely love learning and developing myself. So it's interesting whenever, even in my position, being in a relationship, having that person default to a lot of past relationship positions, like defaulting to a negative position when something's said and it wasn't intended to be negative, but they decided to find it to be an insult, and how to deal with that. I find it's easier to default myself, like I have to defend myself now that you've, went from, being, whatever it is. And, most statements are based off observation when communicating with somebody else in a relationship situation or involving relationship conversation, and not having any intention of it being anything other than a benign statement. There was no specific direction, there was no polarity to it. The other person heard something that made them think something other than what you intended to say, and they will usually go to that default. For me, I find that my default is disappearing. Like I have to be under a great deal of stress, like significant stress from many angles that I actively work on not having or that not influencing me negatively, because I'm aware of them. So I put work into them. So I'm less likely to default to overstressed and then finding that survival default mechanism. That'll be for another video. But with this, I find that mine's reacts. I'm less reactive than I used to be because I've been at work on myself for a long time now. But my partner is a little newer to the game of development. She's by no means, an amateur at it, but she's not expert level either. I've introduced her to a lot of developmental context to help her grow. So there's still times whenever there's other aspects and stressors coming in at us, with uncertainty in finances or whatever could be stressing us out, or stressing my partner out with work, or being stretched too thin with how much time she has and how much demand she has on her. But she consistently does prefer to go to the negative. Just it's been a condition that she's gone through. I'm not making it a fault of hers or anything like that. I'm not making her wrong by it. It's more of a let's understand so we can grow through these challenges. And some of the challenges that that I find that it takes a sea captain, if you will, like a navigator, to get through it. So in the instance, the most recent is, there was just a few things that were said that did not have a polarization. There wasn't a make wrong or anything like that coming from me. Nowhere in the context in my own mind was it intended to come that way, but it was received that way. Not even in the dialective. I wasn't speaking in such a way that would be considered intended to be negative. But yet my partner experienced that. So what do we do with it? And I found that I wanted to defend myself initially. I held back a great deal of that desire to defend myself because it caught me off guard. And then I realized that I was willing to play a game called a fight. And I was, no, I don't stand for that. I would rather grow through it rather than, be right about something. Now, be right, and this is just in the argument context. Being right is I have to win the fight. I have to win the argument. That's being right. Not the real essence of being right, which means that, there's a fact to the position. Although the context for the person wanting to be right will utilize that idea that there is a fact to the position. And there very well maybe, it doesn't matter, because the big picture is the relationship itself, not being right at the moment. Reality based, then work with them on that, not necessarily, not in a fighting context, but it affects their life all the way around if they're not really anchored to reality. But first, before you start trying to play the game, if they are, recognize if you are. There's going to be checks and balances to find out how rooted in reality you are. Other people will let you know. You just have to know how to see it. So, also for another video, but for this one, it's really let's define a few things. First is the fishbowl. The fishbowl is the context, and the context is what is so about what your viewpoints on reality is. You will find that the other person has a viewpoint of reality that's linked in a common conversation, but yet may not be this. But the context isn't necessarily shared between the two of you as a total. So what you believe is right or wrong may not be the same thing they believe is right or wrong. And there's the disconnect between the two. Most likely you don't even have the definition of what love is between the two of you. Now, love is an interesting definition. This helps create a context, right? The fishbowl. So I ask this question to my students all the time, and any partner that I've had in the past, including my present partner, is define love. Tell me your working definition of love. Most people are like, you know what love is? I'm like, well, act as if you had to write it in the dictionary, and I have no clue. Like, you actually have to educate me, but I'm going to pick a dictionary up to do so. So what is love in that context? Define it for me, what your idea of love is. From that, then you understand where you're coming from. A lot of people I've talked to have the position of martyrdom, like, I'll do anything for my partner. Well, the problem is whenever you have the context of martyrdom for what love is, then you're going to be the person that wants the other person to also do anything for you. Now, do you see this creates an entire required necessary in order to justify that. Now, what we'd like to do is, because we don't have the clarity of it, we think everybody's into the same context or the same definition of love, that when another person doesn't do those actions, you default that person doesn't love you because they're not proving it by their actions. Now, some people think love is providing. There's a great deal of men think this way. That's why you'll have guys that work their ass off, right, to develop their family and to make sure there's funds available for their family. They sacrifice their time with their family, which hurts them because they long for their family while they're away from them, but they feel justified in their actions because they're developing the money to make sure their family has the life that they all want. But they miss the fact that the family also wants them in the life. So they supersede that by actions of work, right? So that's a provider love. The lion for love, right? It's the one that goes out courageously to bring in, because they have to go back out and get more. And that's the provider lion of love. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of these contexts. What we have that we're dealing with, see, apparently my dogs agree, if you guys heard that. So there's always different definitions for love. So if the book, The 5 Love Languages, which is a great book, actually, I have it in my library. If I were to see it real quickly, I would actually show you. But regardless, just off the title, you'll find it, The 5 Love Languages. And that is such a great book. It gives you definability to the context of love, not the definition. but the different types of love languages that people anticipate, and then if they don't mix and match, or if they don't match, then how they, how they're mixed up. There's different degrees of what ways you like to express love and also receive love, and it's not always the same. Just because you like to receive love a certain way does not mean you like to express love the same type of way. You'll have your own way of doing it, and it's important to find out with your partner what kind of love languages they have. Now, that's part of the context, how you express love and how you anticipate having love return to you. Now, if you guys have different contexts, then obviously there's something going on that's addressable. It doesn't mean give up and walk away. You can count that scoreboard, though, by the way, and that's part of the scoreboard. Whenever you're right or wrong, even if you win the argument, and you win a lot of your arguments, you start to qualify whether that person is worthy of being with you. Now, this is the cut the forest down context. This is where a lot of people now on both sides, like if you keep losing, it's like it becomes this battle where you don't get to express yourself anymore without feeling like you're being judged to be wrong. So if you're constantly losing your arguments, then you get this feeling like, why try? I'm always wrong with you. I'm never right. I just feel like I can't do anything right with you. That's that side. On the other side is like, I don't even know why I'm wasting my time. This person just isn't living up to my expectations. You may not say that, or that person may not say that cognitively or even verbally, but it's still there in its context. The truth of the actions for the definition of that, the terminology is still there. It's available, and it defeats the relationship. You see, both sides, there's a laziness that comes from ignorance, and ignorance means non-exposure or non-awareness. So there's this laziness that comes out of it, meaning that if you want to work for the relationship and you say you want to work for the relationship, it's the same as anything else. If you want to start a company, you have to know how to develop a company or be curious on how to do it, rather than try to go in with the skill set you currently have if you've never run a business before, and go in with that same skill set expecting that skill set will run the business. It won't, because you haven't run a business before. You're not going to accidentally fall into it. You're going to have to develop yourself in order to achieve those results. So it takes work, and work doesn't mean right or wrong and battle. It means, hey, if we're fighting or we're arguing or we're disagreeing, let's figure out what. Just consider that your relationship is kind of like Michelangelo, right? And he's got his little chisels, right? And or canvas, and you're getting some outside influence on turning you into this amazing thing. The view of the desire that you have in being a certain person in a relationship, that the other person is showing you that you're not quite that person yet. Now, this doesn't mean accept defeat and you'll never be that person. This other person is showing you what areas you're not quite what you want to be yet, as well as what areas they want you to be that you're not yet. So they're chipping the edges off this ball, this piece of marble. They're chipping these pieces off. Now, as they keep chipping it off, it's a little uncomfortable. If you can imagine being this slab of marble, you can imagine it being fairly uncomfortable as you're getting etched out, right? But ultimately, what happens at the end is you become this beautiful work of art that is timeless and ageless. Is that's part of the relationship legacy that you create, is it becomes the thing people talk about later on, whether like you become the yardstick by which all other relationships are measured. If the relationship between the two of you don't survive, or the observers from the outside that see your relationship start using you as the architect or the archetype of of a good relationship, they see it and they say that person is actually, I wish I could a relationship and develop themselves in a relationship that really works for everyone, and most importantly for themselves. So that these portions of what matters is, the slab of marble never finds comfort being manipulated to the point, where they're being, crafted out. So that's what I find whenever there's a relationship disagreements and some tension in the relationship. I find that those things are actually our developmental, the little pieces that we're holding on to or we're unaware of, either way, that we're not willing to, or that we need to get smoothed out to become that thing that we really wish to be. So that's some of the reasons why there's some pain or struggle or some of the hardship in relationships, that it's a way of looking at it from another perspective. This isn't the optimistic perspective, and I want to be sure that you understand that. This is the developmental perspective. I have no intention of being delusional and making everything positive the rest of my life and realize that I'm missing a lot of great lessons because I'm delusionally attached to the idea of optimism. This is the maturity, the maturing developmental aspect of it. So there's that. The disagreement itself, I kind of talked about that already, which is, there is something there, and that's actually the language that is your developmental exercise that develops a skill. So whenever disagreements occur, those disagreements can actually be seen through. So you can find solutions even if the other person isn't necessarily playing the game with you. And if you can find the disagreement, the conclusions to those disagreements, or at least the solutions to those disagreements, you now have an ability to overcome these disagreements in the future with anyone, because you know how to find solutions rather than, well, that person's just a dick, right? Or playing the victim, right? Because that's a very common default for people. I like to play the victim, right? And if you're a victim, the person that's doing something to you is the villain. There's no other way around it. And every time you share that story with somebody else, you're enrolling people in that other person being a dick, right? For me, I look at it from both sides. You're both dicks, right? Because you're playing a game. Girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. If you're playing that game, I look at both people as, not like a finite, you're a dick, and that's your terminology, or for the rest of my life, I'll identify you that way. No, you lack a skill set that's necessary to overcome your objections, and you're attempting to find people to agree with you so you feel comfortable about being wrong or to be in that position. You're just trying to find comfort in that. There's no one who wins that. Now, what you may do is that relationship may crash and burn that you're currently in, because you're actually adding fuel, trying to set the plane on fire while it's flying. But the person listening may find that pity party context, and then they may start finding you attractive because they may have a savior complex, or they want to try to save you from some sort of turmoil, which victims love that, and savior complexes love finding victims. So of course they fit very well. They're fluid together. They're very comfortable together when that role is allowed to be played. But when they come together, then the savior usually cannot continue to maintain saving the victim, because the victim now needs a villain, and the villain can only be the savior. So it's a vicious cycle that people keep playing. For time's sake, I can't go much further into this video just because I'm very restricted this morning, but I wanted to get up and create a conversation around something that's a common issue in people's lives. I don't know many people, and this includes the mega wealthy, because I live in Clearwater, and I do have quite a few people around me that are considered very wealthy people, and I happen to be friends with a fair amount. And doesn't matter if they have a great deal of money. These things happen if you're on welfare, or if you own a freaking corporation, top 100 corporations. It still happens. This is not something that doesn't happen. This skill, you become that much more attractive to people, because now you're a solution maker rather than a defeated individual playing some sort of role or something, or a great battle captain, right? You actually create solutions, so no one has to lose. Everyone wins. And that's one of the things that people find so attractive about, the enlightened or the more mature people. So with all of that, I would love to continue with this video. Look for part 2 of this. It's coming in the near future. Again, this is Chad Everett Brochures, the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, and also the author of The Human Manual, which is a series of books you will be seeing published in the very near future. Thank you for chiming in. Again, if you have any comments or feedback, please leave it in the comment section, and please share this video as you wish, and please share it often. Thank you, guys.